Our next topic is on using the work of others, and I am so excited about this topic. Since the NERC papers come out, I've had a lot of questions. We've had a lot of discussions on WECC about what does this mean, and what are you going to accept? What are you going to take? And I'd kind of like to swap the question a little bit and ask you, what do you have that you'd like to share? So as you think about this, and as we go through the conversation, think about the things that you're doing. What are your internal audit departments doing? What are your consultants doing? What work are you already doing that you could share with us? And what do those work papers look like? So I think we'll have some answers for you here, but I'd also like to open it up to you to partner with us on some of the opportunities that you see out there. I see tons and tons of possibilities about how we could start using the work of others, but how we turn those into the opportunities is really going to be a partnership between us. So my team's over here. They're waving. They're ready to be introduced. First of all, Tom Williams is our manager of entity monitoring manager. And as Steve mentioned, we now have 3 entity monitoring managers, so he is one of our 3. Lonnie Ratliff is next. He is the director of compliance assurance and certification at NERC, and we're very happy to have Lonnie here. He was part of helping write the NERC paper, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of insight for everybody. Aldo Navarez is one of our senior auditors at WECC. On his expertise is in cybersecurity. He's on the high inherent risk team with Tom now. And last but not least is Morgan King. He is a senior technical advisor. And if you all haven't had a chance to use our senior technical advisors, they're a wonderful resource for you. They're not on the audit teams. They are on the audit teams. They work with entity monitoring. They're really available to answer your questions. And that's the role that Curtis Cruz has stepped into as well. So we have 2 senior technical advisors that are available for you. So I will turn it over to you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah. Boo. Happy Halloween. Pablo Oñate, you don't strike me as a shy or bashful guy. Do you mind standing up and showing everyone what you have on? This is. Thank you, buddy. That's awesome. I appreciate that. I'm going to kick us off here, then we'll do some introductions, and then we'll get into the slides. I'm Tom Williams. It's my pleasure to be with you today. This really is a privilege. I am on a complete and total high from some conversations and reunions I had before dinner, during dinner, after dinner yesterday. Wow, I really love the opportunity to catch up and have some conversations. Okay, Scott, I'm going to use the phrase risk-based standards where we sort of are. I just think that's awesome. And I'm going to do my part to get us a little further down the path. So thank you for that. In college, we called using the work of others cheating. Now we call it Chat GPT. And we're going to be talking about some other ways of looking at using the work of others. Deb, thank you so much for setting the context today of questions, your questions. We'll have some answers, but here's the thing. There are so many scenarios out there of using the work of others, and we, WECC, really need your help understanding what those scenarios are so we can be of the best help to you. And before we do some introductions here, I'm going to give you a scenario to think about that relates to using the work of others. So imagine you've received your 270-day notice that we're going to audit you. And someone in your organization says, hey, we've got an internal audit department, and we've been doing some work. We've been taking a close look, our internal auditors have, at TOP3 and CIP12, and bringing those 2 standards together. And we've also been looking at FAC 8. And imagine also that you self-log And we'll be talking about self-logging later in one of our sessions. And imagine also that you have a neighbor entity that you have great rapport with, and there's a subject matter expert at your neighbor entity who is a specialist in TOP3 or any of the standards I mentioned. We'll be talking about ISME, industry subject matter expert, later also. Imagine your internal audit team does an audit of TOP3 and SIP12 and FAC8 and finds some things and self-logs, or if you don't self-log, self-reports. And here's the punchline I want you to think about. You let us know in advance that you've done all this work. The question on the table is, could the WECC audit team make use of that work at audit? The answer is yes. There are a lot of details, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's introduce my friends here. Lonnie, we'll start with you. Thank you so much for joining us from NERC. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity to come out. You know, at NERC, we've seen this topic a lot, right? We get this from all the regional entities, all the industry of asking. You know, we do all this work behind the scenes and bringing this topic up and looking for those opportunities to actually explore, to see how the auditors can use the work, that it doesn't go to waste, right? Because that's what a lot of people say, hey, we just evaluated this. We had somebody come in and now WECC's coming and redoing everything that we've paid somebody else to do. So I appreciate the opportunity to come. The conversation, I really look forward to the conversation, and thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Lonnie. Aldo?
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to be here. This is an exciting topic. In my past, when I worked with one of the big three audit firms, used this concept of the work of others, and I'm excited to see us getting into it in our industry and take advantage and leverage that.
Thank you, Aldo. Hi, Morgan.
Oh, there we go. Hi, Morgan King. I've been with WECC 13 years now, and was on the SIP team for 10 of those years, and now in this role as senior technical advisor, and looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Morgan. I don't think I know how to work the slides. It's the green button, right? This is fun. Nope, that's backwards is working. There we go. Okay. I'm going to warm us up with a little story. I had notes. I actually prepared notes for this. And this story is about BCSI in the cloud. So I had a folder of paper. I'm not so paper oriented anymore, but I knew I'd have some time on the plane. So I brought some notes, and I was reading and taking notes, and so this is about BCSI in the cloud. So some of the notes in my folder were marked BCSI, and I left my folder on the plane. So now we have BCSI in the cloud. Do you see? That's BCSI in the cloud. I'm kidding about the BCSI, Deb. There was no... But I decided, who needs notes, right? This is much better just for me to talk. So here's why this matters today, what we're going to learn. We're going to learn what does that mean, others? Who are these others? They're all of us, actually, and more, many that aren't in this room. What is work in this context? What work qualifies? How do we employ generally accepted audit practice and principles when using the work of others? And how work of others can support WECC's work and your work at audit. I'd like to emphasize this idea of avoiding duplication of effort. Why would we re-perform your good work that you've already done? It's not a good use of time. If you've done great work, and there's a lot in that phrase, but we'll unbox that a little bit. If you've done great work, why should we necessarily reperform it? We have two documents that form the foundation of our guidance on using the work of others. The U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO, has something called Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards. We call it GAGAS, and it's known as the Yellow Book. Section 8.8, and specifically subsection 0 through 6, talk about using the work of others. This is in a sense our authority for what we're talking about today, not so much from a regulatory point of view, but from a reference point of view. Really encourage you to look at that. And we have a CMEP, Compliance Monitoring Enforcement Program Practice Guide. These practice guides are written by the ERO and used by the ERO and made public for transparency. And the latest one from March of this year, I believe, is specifically on using the work of others. And Lonnie, I'd really be interested if you could share how this came about, the history of it, why we have it, and any other thoughts you'd like to share.
Appreciate that, Tom. You know, we all know that industry and NERC and FERC loves practice guides, right? That's common. Just ask Scott, he's well aware of the practice guide conversations. Anyway, the practice guide using the work of others. So there was an opportunity several years ago that there was a lot of government agencies talking to FERC, talking to us around FSMA audits. And then other industry was saying, hey, we've got a strong internal audit team that's doing a lot of this. And, you know, we started talking to the region saying, okay, what are we seeing? Let's look at some of this stuff. And then we said, well, you know, you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to use the work of others. You know, it's in the Yellow Book. Why don't the regions do that? And then, you know, there's quite a bit of pressure. It says, well, can we make it more clear to industry that they can do that or we can do that? So the practice guide is a perfect example of saying, okay, yeah, it was open, it was available. The regions were hesitant to actually use it, even though it was pretty clear to us. But we saw an opportunity to say, you know what, let's go ahead and document this. Let's put some examples out there and give the auditors an opportunity to think about it. Think about those times that they could use that work around those different opportunities. And like Tom mentioned, you know, we bring up FSMA, we bring internal audit. There may be other opportunities as well, right? External engagements from vendors, things like that. There's that independence, you know, there's some things that have to check the box for that. And primarily it's around independence, things like that. But we saw the opportunity to make it, okay, let's get something out there, very transparent to industry. And it was driven by a lot of those government agencies and internal, those larger industry participants with strong internal audits.
Thank you, Lonnie. Any thoughts on why the regions were hesitant? What was going on there?
You know, I don't really, you know, I don't really know their hesitation. I think, you know, unless it's documented in a practice guide and saying you can do this, do this, because we've stressed saying, hey, it's in the Yellow Book. You can, you know, I think our rules of procedure actually call out and says the Yellow Book is a guide, right? So we can use that. But getting people comfortable with it and giving a little more feel to it around exactly provide examples of exactly how it's done, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about that several times across the Air Enterprise of these examples and how to document that, what that may look like, but until you start seeing it in the field and get comfortable with it. And I think this is why this presentation is so valuable here is until people start getting comfortable with it and what that looks like, right? In both sides. We won't know.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie. And here we are getting comfortable with it. This is an important step in our process. And from my notes, which are in the cloud, I want to quote you a couple examples from the CMEP practice guide here, and specifically relates to who these others are. The practice guide gives 4 general examples. An independent subject matter expert, interesting, right? Pay attention to ISME later in the sessions here. A government entity such as the Government Accountability Office, which we just mentioned, or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. A contractor who has been commissioned by the registered entity as an independent third party, interesting scenario. An internal department within the registered entity that is independent of the department performing reliability standards operation. Wow, a lot going on there, especially with the word independent. One more quote from the practice guide. The use of the word others in this practice guide refers to internal or external parties that perform work for the registered entity. Similarly, independent refers to the internal or external party that can objectively carry out its work for the registered entity in an unbiased manner. Just reflecting on some great conversations I had yesterday about independence. Okay, let's move forward here. We're going to do some examples now. Let's make this a little more pragmatic for you. And Morgan, I'm going to pass to you now to talk about some examples. And granted, these examples are all from the SIP world, but let's start there.
All right, thank you, Tom. So back to the practice guide for a moment. In no way is the practice guide. There we go. Okay. So the practice guide, its purpose is not to limit what can be considered, what standards or requirements and standards could be considered for leveraging the work of others. Your entity may already be utilizing the work of others for personal risk assessments in SIP 4, your CVAs in SIP 10, service risk assessments in SIP 11, and I'll speak a little more about that in a moment. Your third-party assessments of vendors, and then as required in SIP 14, if you have applicable facilities, to use those unaffiliated third-party reviews. So stepping back for a moment, a little history. In 2019, we had the 2019 02 standard drafting team working on the development of SIP 4-7, what is now going to be mandatory enforceable in January, SIP 4-7, SIP 11-3, which opened up the door to BCSI in the cloud. And in 2019, we had entities asking us about this environment, and cloud service providers asking us about the work of others, and we were invited, some of us from the ERO were invited to participate in a review of a cloud service provider's environment and walk through their security assessment reports, those things that they provide for a FedRAMP certification. And we also met with individuals from FedRAMP and a 3PAO, a third-party assessing organization. And, we were able to see and work through it and have assurances of what we may see from entities when they are looking to provide evidence of that environment that they are in, the tenant environment with their BCSI. And so there is currently a practice guide, not a practice guide, but implementation guidance, a proposed implementation guidance that is being reviewed by the ERO. And that also includes aspects of third parties, assessments, and the work of others. Anything else on that?
Yeah, just a question, if I'm not putting you on the spot. Some thoughts on using the work of others versus trusting the work of others.
Well,
big topic.
I mean, just in the context of this environment, the underlay environment, so these cloud service provider environments have the underlay environment that the cloud service provider is responsible for ensuring their controls for their FedRAMP certification. And again, I don't want to, this isn't the conflate certification. The ERO is, if we ever get to a point where there's a determination of certifications and having a baseline of expected certifications for this environment, but that's not what we are currently are is if the entity chooses to utilize that environment for their BCSI, that they are able to leverage from business agreements to third-party these assessments, reviews of these environments, and ensure the security objectives are met. And artifacts to demonstrate that, and that's an aspect of this work of others. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. In case you're wondering if this is a new topic, the last two bullets there make it pretty clear it's not. You've been using the work of others for SIP 13 for a long time now, also for SIP 14. Unaffiliated third-party reviews of risk assessments for SIP 14 are using the work of others. Thanks, Meili. And third-party assessments for vendors in SIP 13. I think it's fair to say that some of the newer SIP standards have a different style and feel and more context for the different possibilities that we have for audit going forward. And I think the O&P standards are evolving in that direction also. Before we move on from this slide, and maybe to help you think of some questions here, before I mentioned in the CMEP practice guide, contractors you might hire to do work for you. So let's take the case of trimming trees, back 3, and also the systems that maintain the database where all your trees are, however that looks for you, and you outsource all that. Is that using the work of others in that sense? I'd like you to think about that. And also, we'll come back to this, and also, would WECC's approach be any different if you had done it yourselves versus hired a contractor to do the work? So I'm just going to leave that question with you while we move on to the next slide. Aldo, I'm going to pass to you in a second here, but we've got some really interesting scenarios outside the standards specifically, and there's an interesting federal context here. And if you would, Aldo, I'd like you to sidebar into some of the great work you've been doing tying the SIP framework to other frameworks that we also use in our industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Before I start, I just want to reiterate a point that you made about the yellow book, that I do encourage you to look at section 8 to get a better understanding of what we are going to go through to consider and apply using the work of others. Key subsections that I think are key is sections 8.83, 8.4, and 8.5, which talks about using the works of others may influence the current audit. Internal auditors' key focus is to assure that the internal controls adequately meet and mitigate risk, and using the work of others as a resource to support the current audit. So I encourage you to take a look at those. And what Tom was talking about on the FSMA audits, FSMA basically is the NIST SP 853R5, which is the security and privacy controls for information systems and organizations. I've been part of a project with the security working group that had mapped the NIST computer security framework to SIP standards, and it's published in their earlier website. And we're currently mapping the SIP to the SP 853. As you may know, that is pretty detailed. It identifies the control. It has discussions about those controls. It identifies any related controls, and also includes what they call control enhancements over and beyond the controls. And within the control enhancements, they have discussions and also related controls. And we're attempting to map the SIP standards to this document in order to support the use of work of others. So if you are audited under FSMA, and you can show us how how the entity considered compliance with SIP. Based on that, we would take a look at that, and on a case-by-case basis, we would look at first of all, the qualifications of the person or people that audited you, look at the artifacts that they provided, the report that they provided, and determine, how best to use that. Other things, mock audits are also another way of that we might take a look at. Internal audit teams at entities, they usually schedule the audits 2 or 3 years in advance. But one of the considerations is if the internal audit team, the audit report is submitted to executive management or the board of directors or the board of governors, that's going to increase the credibility of that effort and that work and to use as an authoritative source for the current audit.
Thank you, Aldo. I'd really love to talk to the federal entities in the room about what it might look like to make use of the results or the artifacts from a FSMA audit for a SIP audit. I'd love to do more to bring these worlds together. Aldo, I'm going to tell a story. I know you're a modest man, and I hope you don't mind. Aldo was involved with the development of what became known as the SIP standards, before that was even an acronym. And one of the original, this was back in the early-ish 2000s, before 2005, one of the original ideas was we already have something for cybersecurity called NIST. Why don't we just use that? One of the reasons we didn't use that is because all of you all are so many different sizes and characteristics and footprints. One size does not fit all for us, and NIST 853 is big and might make sense for a large entity, but wow, be way too much to take on for a smaller entity. SIP is essentially a subset of IT controls, and those are now mapped to the NIST cybersecurity framework, which in a sense is a subset of 853. And since the CSF, the cybersecurity framework, is already mapped to 853, voila, we can map the SIP standards to 853. So a cool prospect there. I'm also really interested in thoughts you might have about how you do mock audits. Is it internal? You're auditing yourself, and who's doing that? What is the level of independence? How would we have assurance that it's unbiased and independent? Or are you mock auditing each other? I know some of you are doing that. We're really interested in that scenario. We're interested in what you might be willing to share from these mock audits, share in the sense of something the WECC audit team might be able to make use of at the audit and streamline the experience. Just want to emphasize, we're exploring many use cases here. We have some answers today, kind of more almost academic answers about what we're actually talking about, but the use cases are all out there with you, and we really want to understand what those are. And that segues nicely to when WECC could use the work of others. The first bullet there, Aldo, you touched on relevance before. WECC will evaluate the relevance of the materials provided to the audit objectives. Audit objectives, also a key phrase there. I think there was a time with the standards where we would have said, if we were asked the question, what's the objective of the audit? The answer might have been something like compliance with the standards and scope. Today, that's the wrong answer. Today, we start with risk, and we have risk categories, we have risk areas. This is how we now develop our scope. And the objective of the audit is to see how well you are mitigating the identified risks. This is a significant change for us. And we appreciate the opportunity to partner with you in this transition because it's a very different way of thinking about the standards. The standards form a context for how we evaluate how well you are mitigating risk. Would love to talk with you more about that. But Aldo, I'd like to, let's just riff here on what might it look like to determine whether artifacts are relevant to the audit objectives. Do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah. For example, if the internal audit or whoever did the audit for you, if they identified a topic for them to audit their audit objectives, if it coincides to audit objective of a SIP audit that we're going to do, if there's a direct mapping between the two, that increases the relevance of the work that they've done to the current audit. And we would like to take a look at the artifacts. What methodology did they use to sample? What did they conclude when they reviewed the evidence? And if we feel that there was a strong independence, the individual that did the audit or the assessment is highly qualified or highly experienced, then that gives it more credence, more reliability of that evidence in the artifact, and we would use that to consider how we're going to approach our audit, which could lead to, on a case-by-case basis, we could decrease the number of samples, or at one point it could be so strong that we just use that as part of our conclusion of our audit. Is one example of what I would be doing.
Thank you, Aldo. I really appreciate that you made that pragmatic with the concept of how it might modify how we sample at audit. And Lonnie, I see you poised, ready to pounce on something. We'll go.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that what you said about the old audit of, hey, show me you're compliant with the standards, because we're really pushing towards how are you mitigating risk, and this feeds right off of Scott's opening comments, which I thought were great. Was are you mitigating risk today, and can you mitigate risk tomorrow? How can you show that? And he mentioned, Aldo mentioned the testing, right? So is there an opportunity that you do a test of 1 or 2 instead of looking at 3 years of historical data for that one piece of zero defect that will get called out, right? Can you trust what you're seeing, test 1 or 2, and move forward? And if you read the yellow book, that's auditing principles that we really need to go and square up to.
Yeah, thanks. Let's continue that just a bit. If you could comment further on a perspective shift here from the past to the future. So we used to be focused on the past, right? And how is this changing?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at. It seems like we're so caught up in showing the last 5 years data you have for this standard requirement. If you read the yellow book and look at principles, we're trying to get more of that. Hey, you're doing some great work. Let's show me that you're compliant today and tomorrow. And if you can demonstrate you have strong controls, it goes into the internal controls conversation. Show that you have strong controls, that you are compliant today, and you got a strong compliant program moving forward to tomorrow. The expectation would be, hey, let's build test 1 or 2, and controls should take that piece.
Having some mic trouble there. Yeah. Any more you wanted to say? No. Yeah. Thank you. Awesome. Yes, Aldo, please.
I just lost my thought. When I remember, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, just let me know. Yeah. Second bullet, I want to emphasize case by case. Can we take the CMEP practice guide that we just mentioned? Can I turn that into a checklist or a formula, or if this, do that? No, we can't. each use case you bring us, we need to evaluate. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. We can't make it simple. We have to understand each use case. I will say, though, the earlier you bring us your scenarios, the better chance we have of integrating the work you've already done at the audit. And here's a key point that I'd like to mention. What's the so what here? The so what is what we are calling, since I think the workshop in spring 2022, we rolled out this concept of a differentiated audit experience. What does that mean? It means one audit doesn't look the same one to the next. And one of the key factors there is our interaction with you up front. Do you have work of others that you can show us? Have you done work on internal controls that you can show us? Is there work you're doing internally that we don't need to duplicate and could differentiate your audit experience? In what way? Maybe, so for a long time, WECC has had this idea of a 2-week engagement. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 3. Why do we do that? I'm not sure anymore. It could be shorter. We could have a more streamlined audit. We could be less in your business over time because of the work of others, the work that you're doing that we don't need to duplicate. Yes, there are a lot of details here, relevance, independence. So it's case by case, and we want to talk with you about all these scenarios. Finally, on this slide, this isn't a requirement to do. Nothing is saying here you have to change anything about what you're doing. This is an opportunity that we are talking about today. All right. I think we're moving on to internal audit. Yes.
Tom?
Yes, I remembered. I did not leave your notes in the cloud there, so I'm pleased.
No, I just wanted to follow up on a comment that Lonnie said in regards to a strong program, strong internal controls. That is an indication of your maturity of your program, not only your compliance program, but your IT security program, and what other programs that you have, which would give us a reasonable assurance that in the future, you're going to have successful audits because of the maturity of your program, because of the strength of your internal controls. So keep that in mind when you're working and developing and improving your internal controls.
Thank you, Aldo. Awesome. All right. Perhaps the primary use case here, or maybe the most obvious use case, is internal audit. And many entities, many companies have an internal audit team that's part of a larger enterprise risk management team, governance, whatever we want to call it. Internal audit is an important function in a company to establish controls and governance. And independence of that team, the unbiased look that team is able to give other departments in the organization, this is a primary use case for us. The work of internal auditors, that's the work that could differentiate your audit experience. So if you're not friends with internal auditors at your company, and I understand not every entity where many different sizes can have internal audit teams, one caution I would make, there's a difference between auditing and performing control activities. Someone at your organization who's performing control activities, that's not an audit, that's not an unbiased independent look at an activity in an organization. So that's a nice nuance there. This is not an all or nothing concept. It could be, for example, that we see that you demonstrate to us you're doing such amazing internal work on TOP3 and SIP12, to bring back the example we started with, that, and we see that you're self-reporting or self-logging. We see that you got it handled. You know what's going on. And we have a great conversation with you about that. Do we need to bring that to audit? Maybe not. So that might be, no, we don't need to bring that to audit. But as Lonnie alluded to before, it could be that some of the work you've done helps us modify our approach to field work, and you could have a different experience than the experience you're used to of going through all the requirements. Did you perform or not perform? It could help differentiate that experience and change the conversations we have. like to emphasize this key point of not reperforming the good work you've already done. Please brag to us. Let us know the good work you're doing. We really want to know about that. I love this last bullet. We've had some questions along the way. Hey, are you just trying to free up your time, WECC, to do other things? No, that would not be risk-based, right? We're all about coming at this from a risk-based perspective. This is really an opportunity for you, a benefit, potential benefit for you. We want to make use of, you're amazing. I mean, one of the best things about this workshop for me is reconnecting with what you are actually doing as entities. I was in industry for a long time, but I forget, right? And I'm not doing it every day. So to reconnect with the great work you're already doing is awesome. And I want to have that conversation with you. We're getting close to the point of questions, so start thinking of some questions. We got mics here. And wow, that was it. What do we have? 10 minutes? That's or 15 minutes for questions. Perfect. Step on up. Oh, awesome. Please. Yeah. Hi, Marty. How are you? Nice. Is your mic on? Do we? Oh. Let's get you some help. Yeah. We'll just switch it.
Okay.
Yeah, you
Thank you for this. I do. It sounds like
tell me more. What's going on? What's your question?
it sounds like we can volunteer for an audit. This is actually good. Well, this
Yes, the item sheet is in the back.
well, this is actually good because if we think we're doing really well at a topic and we're ready to go, let's we can provide the evidence and say, okay, let's get this off our table now. We're doing good with this.
You got it. Yeah, and the sooner the better. And we'd love to have those early conversations with you to help understand what the possibilities are. Yeah.
So thank you for that. Now, I do have another question because this is actually, you were talking about information in the cloud. And now one of our concerns is, I guess I can use the vendor's name, CrowdStrike. We're having an issue. It's a really good tool that we can use on our business side, but we can't really use it. We're afraid to use it on our IS side for our control centers.
Because of compliance risk.
Because of compliance risk.
Yeah. Understood.
So I don't know if that is work that others have done on this, or if you can share that on how that can work out, but something for future. I know that's a big subject.
It's a big subject, but Morgan, maybe you could share.
Yeah, you're gonna be a good example.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so with SIP 4-7, SIP 11-3, that standard is opening the door to BCSI in the cloud. To your question though about where are we with applicable systems in those environments, there are currently a SAR for EACMS and PACS moving through for review, and we should see that being reviewed internally. You have some comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, for the SARs, we got two cloud SARs right now. One is for in the ECMs, and specifically, I think they were calling out Duo in the cloud, and the other was more of operations in the cloud. Those are the two SARs, and I think they're going to be the standards committee in possibly December.
Okay, that's just so we're not going to use it for our control center side until we get all this straightened out.
Thank you. That's great context, Marty. And we never want standards to be in the way of technical innovation in any way. So we really are trying to stay in front of that. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Deb, I wasn't tracking who's next here.
You got some,
okay.
You got some nice Halloween costumes here.
Right, this is awesome. Oh my, this is.
I think I was next, yeah. Along with on good renewables. He actually kind of touched on my question, and it's the impact of artificial intelligence on the auditing process with regards to work from others. Like how is there a framework being developed to really utilize this, the new technologies, and maybe the myth around what AI really is in the larger scheme of things? Like, how is it going to impact our auditing processes?
So to summarize the impact of AI on our auditing processes in general,
And whether or not a framework is being developed with regards to work from others, because it's a vended solution for auditing, but how does that impact work from others?
how does AI
Yeah.
impact work from others? Wow, I don't know that any, have you guys heard anything? Morgan, you would have heard something if anything's going on with AI and.
I mean, there's been conversations, from the technical conferences to meetings at the board level or the NERC board level. I've heard conversations about AI, but in terms of, I mean, we're all in this world of how this is going to impact our individual companies. Yeah.
I would just say to pay attention to AI from a corporate governance point of view and the use of AI in our corporate world, pretty important issue right now. So
I mean, we use aspects of AI in everything we do
Yeah.
already, but then the full takeover of,
Takeover.
the process.
Yes.
I know. The Borg, we are now assimilating to the Borg. Right?
Yeah, thank you for that. Awesome. Over here, thank you. Yeah.
From the city of Vancouver, Canada, BC Highway. So excellent. Actually, I'm very intrigued by this work of others, and so I belong to the department in BC Highway, which actually do these mock audits internally. So we are associated with this assurance program. So we actually do all of those controls and running the standards. We do audit them, and we do a lot of work to make sure we're in line. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that we can use this out of our work. I have a small question. I know you addressed the checklist.
Yeah.
My question is that can we objectify it a bit, like in the sense of the framework possible? Because that can be very helpful for teams like us, like my team, to actually go and see that this is where we can have 1, 2, 3 done, and then that's from it. This is really available to meet you. So is there any thoughts on that?
Going into some thoughts, and then we'll share with the team here. So we have a type of self-certification called guided self-certification, the intent of which is to help you understand how we approach a standard as auditors. And it's specifically meant for internal audit teams to learn how we do things. That's one thought. Another thought is help us understand what independence and unbiased means in your setting. In what way is the work others are doing independent and unbiased? Those are the types of conversations we'll have. Anything to add here?
Well, I think what's important there is understanding the use cases, right? It's hard to build, for us, the Euro Enterprise, to build that framework without getting some of the experience of saying, oh, man, this is really good. Here's some really good things. And I think that's when you start sharing the news of not what was shared, but, hey, this framework worked. Here's what worked for us. And I think, moving forward, maybe this is a topic that you say, hey, these are some lessons learned from how we've rolled this out, right? And this is when industry needs to share their wins.
Thank you, Lonnie. Great question. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Oh my, these costumes. When I called on Pablo, I had no idea.
Jerome Gabi from San Diego Gas and Electric. I came dressed as the compliance superhero Leland McMillan. Okay, so thank you. Thank you, Leland, for your guide.
Does the superhero have a question for the panel?
Superhero does have a question, and I am suffering from a common medical disease called OLD. So I had to write down my question here or type it out. So 1 sec. Oh, shoot. Of course. It timed out on me. Okay. Go from memory here. Thank you guys for doing this work of others, identification. I had not realized how much collaboration we have to seek compliance for all of what we do. I think my focus or my hope is that WECC may be able to kind of refocus that work of others, basically providing, and this is a question, not a statement, providing possibly from audits, both on the O&P side and the SIP side, those experiences that you see of what shows good evidence, a database of some sort to say, look, you know, registered entity XYZ has this great way of completing SIP 10 processes or SIP 7 processes and getting us to that collaboration essence as opposed to terming it work of others. I know you termed it in school, we called it cheating. We then also kind of said, well, that's a little bit of, gosh, now I'm suffering from OLD again. The process of using other people's work. And we used to have the Cliff Notes where we would write book reports based on the Cliff Notes as opposed to the book. What I'm hoping is that you guys, WECC, as audit professionals, come back and say, here's our database of experiences that we saw that were good, bad, and ugly, and really provide it to all of us. And that would, I think, would help us out.
Thank you so much. I love this context, and I see opportunities from more of what I think we're already doing. We would not ever directly say, hey, entity A is doing this, but I'm going to plug WCF here. This is one of the fantastic things that WCF does, is bring entities together. And we love when you collaborate and share the successes you have. Basically, this is a form of the question, what does success look like? What success has WECC seen in the field? We're not shy about, and this is, I'm going to plug our technical advisors here, Morgan and Curtis. We're not shy about saying this is what success we've seen in the field and the tools we've seen used, but to make that a little more formal and to make it available to entities is what I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah, kind of like a database of this is what success looks like. This is what, I mean, the lessons learned that Nick puts out all the time.
Yeah.
But as far as those successes is really what I think I'm hoping for is just materialize or box this
Let's
stuff
stay
up.
in touch on that. I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Time, thank you.
Great job. Great
Time
job.
for two more questions. I don't know who's, Monica? Oh my.
Hi, this is a great presentation. My name is Monica Montes from CAISO. I'm also in costume, but probably not as detailed and eloquent as the one right before me. But, you know, really appreciate you guys starting this conversation and clarifying, demystifying this for us. I know it's a work in progress, but super excited about it. I wanted to see if Morgan or others could maybe or Lonnie could maybe dig a little deeper into internal controls as part of this conversation. In particular, I'm thinking like, for example, like with SIP 11 and controls we might be leveraging from other vendors who are certified through SAS or some, you know, SOC 1 certification reports. How could that be brought forward into this work of others and looking at internal controls in that space?
Thank you, Monica. That's an awesome question. Lonnie and I were just talking about certification yesterday. So would you like to share a bit on that?
No, I think that goes back to that case by case, right? Because we don't know until we know and what that looks like. We know that certification doesn't necessarily mean compliance, but there's a lot of data that is used to get certification that could be used for compliance. And that's the piece that we're trying to get at, is saying, okay, if you're using somebody that is certified, whether it's through whatever, what data, what was that source data, and how can we look at that and verify that? And it may depend on that certification type of, okay, do they test it? Do they, what type of tests do they have? We know, like Morgan mentioned, the FedRAMP moderate, we knew that they test periodically on so many controls. We know that. And that's the type of information that we'd like to get in that source record. And then that's where the test of 1 or 2 really comes into play.
Thank you. Thank you, Lonnie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. I think we're near the time here, and one more question. Thank you.
Is this on? Okay, yes. Eric Hollismud, Morgan, Lonnie, Aldo, Tom, thank you very much. Great presentation.
You're welcome.
You gentlemen definitely know that I've been involved since 2017 on leveraging this and presented to the ERO on leveraging three PAOs like coal fire for FedRAMP moderate certification and everything. So I'm really happy to see this progress in this area. But my question is, this was a great presentation, but I'm left with kind of wondering, has WECC done an audit, an official audit where they've leveraged the work of others yet? And can they share that experience with us? And if not WECC, has anyone in the ERO done an actual audit yet where they've leveraged the work of others and have feedback for us? Because this is great, but I mean, until somebody finally steps up and, actually goes through it, it's really kind of a hypothetical that with a lot of risk, and it seems like very little positive outcome.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I will say we have an opportunity in progress as we speak, and I'll leave it at that. But this is an invitation to begin that process with us. We really do want to hear from you if you have work of others that you believe would be relevant to our work. Please. Thank you, Eric. That was a great question. Deb?
Brady's in the back, but some of you know SIP 14 already has a component. One of the requirements is using the work of others. And, we do start with that in SIP 14 as our basis. And, Brady would probably be happy to talk to you about how he uses the work of others in SIP 14. So I wouldn't say we've never done it. We have a lot of opportunities out there. We have a lot of possibilities, but I wouldn't say that we've never done it. And I think Brady's got some really great examples of where he's used the work of others.
Thank you, Deb. That's awesome. I appreciate it. Lonnie?
Yeah, one last thing is what's interesting is we got to be careful saying doing an audit of using the work of others. The audit process consists of using the work of others. So it can be a component, just like internal controls. It's not something that we're changing. We're just auditing by the auditing guidelines, right? So don't get caught up that it's a new way to audit or anything like that. It's just a component. So don't overcomplicate it.
Thanks, Lonnie. Okay, it's a wrap. Am I passing us to a break here? We have a networking break till 10:20. 10:20.